Okay, so the skin has glands, and remember that those glands are actually epithelial in origin. So that is where they are derived from in our body, not from muscular tissue, not from nervous tissue, not from connective tissue. These are epithelial. So some of those glands can extend down into the dermis, okay? So in this diagram, we have the outer epidermis, which is avascular, it doesn't have blood vessels. And then we have the dermis, which is vascular and has these other structures in it. So when we talk about the skin glands, we can talk about sweat glands. So sweat glands have a couple of different names. They can be called Apocrine glands. They are also classified as merocrine glands. So you might remember that cells are capable of secretion. And so this type of gland, the merocrine glands, actually produce secretions that are just simply moved into a duct, and then they come out to the surface of the skin. So this is my eccrine gland right here. Notice that this part of it is down in the dermis, and then it has a duct. And so it's actually an example of a exocrine gland as well. So we would say that it is exocrine, not endocrine. It doesn't release hormones. It's actually producing and releasing substances into a duct. So sweat glands have lots of water in them. They also have lots of salt in them. We can get rid of extra salt through the sweating process. And it also has antimicrobial things. So we talked about lysozymes, we talked about antibodies are in your sweat, and then acid, right? So your sweat can be very acidic. Sometimes your sweat is more acidic than other times, but that is one way to get rid of extra and balance the pH in the body. So those are the sweat glands. Notice that they are not associated with hair follicles. So this is an example of a hair follicle. And here we have another type of gland. So this is what we refer to as the sebaceous gland. These are associated with hair follicles. And they do not produce sweat, they produce sebum. Oops, there's an S there. It's sebum because of sebaceous, S, sebum. So sometimes you see on the surface of your skin like a whitehead. That is sebum. When that whitehead gets exposed to air, it becomes oxidized and it turns black. So that's your blackhead. If you get infection in that hair follicle and in those glands, that can lead to acne, right? The other thing that's kind of interesting about this sebum is this is lubricating. So this is actually like natural oils. So they might talk about, like, for example, your hair, when you, if you wash it too much, it might dry out because you're not letting the natural oils coat the hair shaft. The natural oils on the surface of your skin actually help keep the skin from cracking. So as you get older, you might produce less of this. And like, for example, your knuckles in the wintertime might dry out and crack, and then they bleed, and then they hurt, and then they could get infected, right? So sebum seems to be like really annoying because it gives us oily skin, but it actually keeps the skin from cracking and drying and then opening up to possible infections. So it's actually a good thing. So like excessively washing your face could actually cause your glands to produce more of the sebum, which could lead to, for example, more clogged pores. And so there's an interesting dilemma, right, about washing your hair and washing your skin. So those are the sebaceous gland, and they're actually a different type of gland. They are called a holocrine gland. Oops. And the reason why they're called a holocrine gland is that they don't secrete substances from the cells, but rather the whole cell, like hollow, whole, just remember that, the whole cell actually breaks off, is pinched off. And in the secretion, in the sebum, you actually have pieces of cell. So this would be a pinching off of the glandular cells. So the glandular cells actually die and they become part of the sebum, which, cells have lots of phospholipids. They have lots of lipids in them. And so that's part of the lubricating process. And so those cells have to be replaced mitotically. So those cells actually have to there has to be cells that undergo mitosis to replace them. Okay. Now, sweat glands are found in a lot of different areas, like even your hands, right? Even like your armpits, you can sweat, right? It could be sweating, could be temperature control, or it could also be stress. So sweat gland and the production of sweat is actually controlled by the nervous system. So your sympathetic, your fight or flight nervous system is what causes you to sweat. And so when you get nervous, you sometimes get sweaty palms, right? When you get nervous, you might get sweaty underneath your armpits when you're stressed a little bit. And so that is a sign of stress, sweating is, right? The sebaceous glands are anywhere we have hair, which we actually have hair follicles over a lot of the body. But we have one type of gland cell, another type, which is actually not shown in this diagram, which is referred to as an apocrine gland. So this is another type of gland. So notice that it has crine in it. So apocrine is as opposed to merocrine, as opposed to holocrine. It is kind of a combination between an ecrine and a holocrine in terms of its mechanisms of secretion. But one of the things that they think that the apocrine glands do is that these produce pheromones. Pheromones, I spelled that. There's no H, but it's a kind of a type of hormone, pheromone. So you might have heard about pheromones in like psychology class, because these are chemicals that are used to communicate between individuals, right? So when somebody smells good to you, it's like not just because they use like lotion or deodorant or a specific soap, but they actually like smell good to you. That is probably because of their apocrine glands. And these are found in areas where we have lots of hair. So this would be like the axillary region, your armpit region. That's not how you spell region. Region. Pheromone. Okay. And then maybe your genital region. Maybe this is why we have pubic hair, for example. That's what it is found in. Okay. So these make us smell good to potential mates, for example. Okay. So those are apocrine glands.